She hadn't broken a single law, yet Margaret Thompson, dressed in a shimmering emerald gown, found herself pulled over on a quiet suburban street, the kind where kids ride bikes until dusk and neighbors wave from porches. The cop's flashlight burned into her face as he sneered, "Who's bankrolling that dress, lady?" They thought she was just another target alone, vulnerable. They had no idea her husband, David Thompson, was a high-ranking official at the Justice Department. What unfolded next wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a reckoning that would shake a city. Stick with His is a story of power, prejudice, and the kind of silence that speaks louder than sirens. The gala's jazz still hummed in Margaret's ears as she stepped into the cool night air of Willow Creek, a tidy Virginia suburb. Her heels clicked softly on the pavement, her gown catching the streetlight's glow as she slid into her sleek gray sedan. At 52, Margaret moved with the grace of someone who'd learned to navigate rooms where she was often the only black woman present. A financial advisor with a corner office, she'd built a life of quiet precision. She started the engine and eased onto the empty road, the world asleep under a blanket of stars. Then, blue lights sliced through her rearview mirror. Margaret's pulse quickened, but her face stayed calm. She signaled, slowed, and pulled to the curb, her hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. The patrol car's high beams flooded her car, a deliberate glare that felt less like protocol and more like a power play. 2 white officers stepped out, their silhouettes sharp against the light. Officer Mark Reynolds, lean and smug, sauntered to her window, flashlight swinging like a club. He tapped the glass twice, hard. Margaret lowered it halfway. "Is this your car?" Reynolds asked, shining the light directly into her eyes. His tone wasn't curious, it was accusatory. She blinked once, hands steady, and said nothing. His partner, Officer Tom Carver, leaned toward the passenger window, smirking. "No need to be nervous, ma'am. Just routine." But the word routine carried a weight that made her stomach tighten. Margaret knew this script. Every black professional did. You don't argue. You don't flinch. You wait. "Open the trunk," Reynolds said, no explanation offered. Margaret's gaze stayed forward, her voice even. "On what grounds?" His smirk faltered, then hardened. "Just do it." She reached for the console, popped the trunk, and returned her hands to the wheel. Neither officer checked it. Instead, Carver muttered to Reynolds, "Get this on video. Make it good." The confirmation hit like a slap. This wasn't about the law. It was a theater, and Margaret was the unwilling star. Reynolds leaned closer, the flashlight's heat grazing her cheek. "What do you do, huh? Somebody's assistant dressing up for the night?" His words dripped with mockery, daring her to react. Margaret's fingers tightened slightly on the wheel, the only sign of her restraint. She said nothing, her silence a shield. Carver chuckled, his light lingering on her gown. "Bet she's somebody's trophy wife." "Whose is it, sweetheart?" The insult wasn't just personal, it was a calculated jab at her existence in a world they didn't think she belonged in. Margaret's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, not for escape but for strategy. She reached for her phone, slow and deliberate, and tapped twice. The call connected, the screen glowing faintly. "I'm being stopped," she said softly, no panic, just fact. "Same spot." Lights again. She set the phone down, the line still open. Reynolds scoffed. "Calling your lawyer? Or maybe your sugar daddy?" His laugh was cruel, but Margaret's gaze didn't waver. "I called the man who's about to end your night early," she said, her voice a blade of calm. The officers froze, their confidence flickering. Carver stepped closer, his tone sharper. "Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." But before Margaret could respond, a black SUV rolled silently into view, its presence heavy, like a storm cloud settling over the street. The driver's door opened, and David Thompson stepped out. At 55, David carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who'd seen systems bend and break. His tailored suit was immaculate, his gloved hands steady. He didn't shout or rush. He simply walked forward, each step a verdict. Reynolds stiffened, his hand brushing his holster. "Sir, stay back. This is an active stop." David didn't pause. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a leather case, and opened it. The badge inside gleamed like a guillotine. "I'm David Thompson," he said, his voice low, unshakable. "And you're done here." Margaret opened her car door, stepping out with the same poise she'd carried all night. She stood beside David, shoulder to shoulder. "He's my husband," she said, and the air shifted, the officers' bravado crumbling under the weight of their mistake. David's eyes locked on Reynolds, not with anger, but with precision. "You didn't state a reason for the stop. You didn't log the interaction. You turned off your body cams." He listed their failures like a judge reading charges. This wasn't a stop. It was a performance. And it's over. Margaret raised a small recorder, its red light blinking. She pressed play, and the officers' voices echoed back crude, mocking, undeniable. "Is that enough?" she asked, her tone polished steel. Carver's face went gray. Reynolds tried to protest. "We're within our rights," but David cut him off, pulling out an iPad. 3 prior stops, he said, swiping through files. Same time, same script, no records. All dismissed for lack of evidence. You designed them to disappear. He turned the screen, showing names, dates, and faces. The officers didn't move, their authority unraveling in real time. Margaret spoke, her voice clear. "I filed a complaint 3 years ago. It was buried, labeled no pattern. My name was flagged as provocative. You thought I'd stay quiet." Reynolds' jaw twitched. "You're Margaret Evans," he choked out, realizing too late. "It's Thompson now," she said, and the circle closed. This wasn't random. It was a reckoning they'd walked into blind. David tapped his iPad, his voice steady. "This is David Thompson, submitting a formal recommendation for the immediate suspension of Officers Reynolds and Carver. Attached is evidence of procedural breach and misconduct." He sent the file, the confirmation ping cutting through the silence. Carver bristled. "You can't do this here." Margaret's eyes burned. "A habit without law is a crime," she said, her words slicing deeper than any shout. A third figure appeared, a man in civilian clothes, silent but heavy with purpose. Internal affairs. The officers' shoulders slumped, their badges suddenly feeling like liabilities. David didn't gloat. "We're not ending your careers," he said. "You did that. We're just making it official." Reynolds handed over his badge, Carver following, their hands trembling. The weight of their actions had finally caught up. The aftermath wasn't loud, but it was seismic. By morning, precinct servers buzzed with directives. Reynolds and Carver suspended, their files reopened. Across Willow Creek, body cams were mandated 24/7, and a civilian oversight board was established with real power. Margaret's recorder became a training tool, her silence a case study in restraint. David's evidence decades of buried complaints sparked a citywide audit, exposing a network of cover-ups led by Police Chief Raymond Holt, who was forced to resign when his memos surfaced, ordering the deletion of Margaret's original complaint. Months later, Margaret and David sat in a community center, not for applause but to listen. A woman shared her own story of being stopped, her voice shaking but resolute. A teenager asked, "How do you stay calm when it's so wrong?" Margaret leaned forward. "You don't stay calm to feel good. You stay calm to win." David nodded, his silence the anchor that let her words soar. The city changed, not overnight but irreversibly. Training manuals were rewritten, officers faced scrutiny, and citizens learned to ask harder questions. A plaque went up in the park where it all began. Silence, held long enough, becomes justice. No names, just truth. Margaret and David walked past it one evening, their hands brushing, their steps steady. They'd never needed to shout. Their presence was enough. This story isn't just about one night, it's about every night someone's judged by their skin, not their actions. Have you ever faced injustice that made your blood boil? Or seen power misused in ways that left you speechless? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you stand on confronting prejudice and abuse in our systems. Your voice matters, so let's keep this conversation alive.